This episode of Tim and Phill is brought to you by the amazing podcast Necessary and Sufficient. Join Evan Foreman each week in an exploration of ideas as his guests are asked to explain two related yet distinct concepts. You can listen to Necessary and Sufficient for free on the iTunes Store or stream it directly from www.duckandshed.net. His name's Phill.
And his name is Tim.
And this is Tim and Phill Talk About Games.
A podcast where Tim and myself get together and talk about games we've recently played and discuss topics in the world of gaming.
This week on the podcast, we clutch our flashlights, check our batteries, and brave the dark together as we explore the often overlooked genre of co-op horror.
Yes, we'll be asking ourselves whether the horror genre can truly exist in a cooperative setting where power fantasies must give way to a feeling of mutual helplessness. That's right, this is the Tim and Phill Talk About Games podcast, and today we are talking about horror games, cooperative horror games in particular, and also just cooperative experiences in general coming from that. This is another user-prompted topic, which is really, really great, and we'll give credit to the guy that gave it to us later on in the show. But first, before we get started, we're going to just quickly run through some shoutouts, because we actually have quite a few this week, which is really great.
This week, or this fortnight, shoutouts, I guess.
Yeah,
so we have some new Facebook likes from Nujan Katan. Thank you very much, Nujan.
Yes. From
Stanyo, which is nice, because he also gave us the topic.
Yes, exactly.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Aishimano Query, I think that is how you pronounce it. Query.
I think that's close.
Yeah.
Maybe. And we're sorry again.
Which is nowhere near as bad as how I'm going to butcher this one, which is Elzbieta Bukskowska, I think.
Yeah, let's go with that. We're so sorry, once again.
Feel free to correct us if we've said it wrong.
Yeah.
Just message us and be like, hey, you uncultured heathen, maybe you should learn my name.
Yeah, exactly.
So please do let us know. And we got some from YouTube as well.
Yep. So we got Scott, who I actually met a while ago, actually, on a retreat down south with our good friend Andrew. He's a cousin, I want to say, from England, or just a friend. I think a cousin. Somehow related.
There's maybe some blood familial relationship,
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but he was really cool. We played a lot of board games, we got really, really drunk, so it was really fun. So Scott, we also got Ashley Patton, and Aidan Hotan, who is Tim's roommate.
Who, while we were recording the show notes, thought, I wonder if I'm subscribed.
Which is really nice. So thank you very much to everybody that keeps liking and subscribing to us on YouTube and that kind of thing. We're very happy that you find us compelling enough to listen to for, at least 10 minutes every day before people turn it off.
Before you press next.
Exactly. So we've got a couple of reminders before we keep going. Tim, what do we got?
The big one is the PAX Australia panel that's coming up at the end of this month. We have the November 1st panel in the Drop Air Theatre at 6 p.m. Mm-hmm. So if you are attending PAX this year, please do swing on by. Have a listen to us talk about video games and science and video games and how they interact with each other in all the cool little ways that you might not have thought about. Yep. And to be a part of the panel experience, because we hope for it to be at least moderately interactive. So
yeah, we're hoping to do a couple of hands ups, a couple of interactive kind of experiments. We'll see how it goes, but depends on what kind of stuff they actually have available for us to use. So we'll see how that pans out. The other reminder is, of course, with regards to the format of the show, just a reminder that we are moving to more topic-based podcasts in the long podcasts. If you still want reviews of games, make sure to follow us on YouTube, because we are going to be posting them, I think, exclusively there. Because the video
short,
format,
fast, and furious.
Yeah, the video format really, suits it a lot better, and it means that we don't have to explain as much about the game because it's kind of self-evident in the videos. So we're looking at kind of max 5 minutes for your standard game, maybe 10 minutes for a game that we really enjoy and we really want to dig into. There's still potential for doing really, really long-form critical analyses of games, which is something that we're kind of thinking about doing on games that kind of deserve it.
They either have to be stupidly good or stupidly bad.
or just plain interesting. Like, there are some games out there that the mechanics are interesting enough that you can break them down a little bit. So, and maybe the history, who knows. But yeah, our YouTube channel is definitely where to go if you want more reviews, short reviews of games. Whereas this podcast is going to remain more of a topic-based discussion. And our topic-based discussion for today, speaking of segues, is...
Oh look, a segue!
Yeah.
Just flew over the hill there.
We don't have that many segues around here. There is one dude that actually has a... it's like a Segway, but without the bit that you hold on to. Like, that whole pillar is just gone.
Oh, you're talking about the mobile vehicle now.
Yeah. It's just... Oh, I am definitely talking about the mobile vehicle. So it's just two wheels and a platform in between them, and it's battery powered, and he just rolls around Victoria Park. Cool. Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, so the completely off topic. So the topic today is yet again prompted by Stanyo, who was so chuffed with our previous episode that he suggested another one, which is really fantastic. So thank you, Stanyo, once again for giving us something to talk about.
This week we won't forget to plug his website like we promised, so we'll do it right now.
We'll do it right now.
www.brailstrom.com, which is .net,
.net,
which is BRAELSTROM. It'll be on the little thing down
It'll be in
there.
the show notes. Yep, it'll be
Or
in the on the site. And he actually posted a really cool little... he's posted a blog post which is kind of discussing the same thing. And his email is asking us, so... just to quote his email, I was wondering if you guys saw my post about co-op horror games, and he does actually have a really, really good post about it. It was basically about the idea of a co-op horror experience and wondering whether or not something like that can be scary, considering you lose one of the major elements of horror, which is the sense of isolation, by default when you do co-op. What do you guys think? Is good co-op horror possible? Now, Stanyo's kind of already answered this question in his blog post, so you should go check it out. We'll make sure that we have the link to the actual post on our website if you want to go and read that. But yeah, it's a very good question because when you are actually playing a horror game, if anyone's played, something like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, or the new Silent Hill prologue, which is apparently incredibly terrifying. I've watched YouTube videos of it because I don't have a PS4, and it is genuinely terrifying. I don't think that I would actually be able to play it. I'm a massive wuss when it comes to horror games. But yeah, if you've played any of those games, you'll know that the main reason why you feel so terrified is the fact that it is just you and the game. And you are... The way that they create the game, the way that they create the atmosphere is all centered around the idea of you being alone in the game, able to fall into that. There's nothing to bring you out. Whereas when you're playing a co-op game, you lose that sense of intimacy with the game because there's someone else in your ear, making jokes about dicks or something like that. It's
if you're playing with Phill.
Hey. Yeah, like you do lose that sense of being the complete focus of the game. And the game probably has to, if you are going to do some kind of co-op horror, it kind of probably has to rely on tropes such as jump scares or, that kind of thing in order to actually get you to be really frightened. And that's not really what I would call a true horror game. No,
that's not horror, that's more... jump scare is almost a genre unto itself these days, especially with the recent sort of release of Oculus Rift dead kits, which is a different type of horror thing entirely. With dev kits, a lot of especially what people are considering horror in the Oculus Rift is just a whole new generation of jump scares facilitated by particularly immersive mechanics, being the fact that it's right up against your face. You've got the goggles on, the headphones on, and if something just comes at you, you feel like it's actually coming at your face, and
you are really isolated from the world. Like there's nothing in your periphery that can remind you of the fact that you're not in this thing. And if you buy into, playing games, and if you get into the zone really, really easily with, something like the Oculus Rift is going to times that by 1,000 because there's just absolutely nothing to distract you. And it's also facilitated by the fact that the Oculus Rift Dev Kit 2, which is the most recent one that came out, actually allows you to turn your head, and where you turn your head, it actually detects the field of view changing. So that's really, like, horror games I think are probably going to be one of the easiest things to translate into the Oculus Rift. In fact, it's going to be almost too easy. Like, basically, as you say, you can just do jump scares, 1,000 times, and people will still be scared. And they'll probably still break their dev kits. I can imagine there's going to be a couple of, chuck-offs.
But then the other thing is that the Oculus Rift also does things like the one of the stock demos is the roller coaster demo, which I think is plenty scary enough without needing jump scares. You know exactly what's coming, and that's almost a horror game in itself.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so we wanted to dig down into what makes a horror game scary and why that isn't kind of able to be translated into the co-op. Now, obviously, the obvious stuff that we've said is the fact that you will probably be, and this is something that Stanyo highlighted in his blog post, is that you're probably going to be on something like, you're either going to be in the same room, in which case, you're just talking to each other and being like, oh, there's probably going to be a zombie pop out. Oh, he's popped out. Shoot him. Yep, he's dead. Cool, let's go. Or you're going to be over Mumble or TeamSpeak or, Skype. Choose your VoIP software. And that kind of breaks the immersion. But there are kind of more subtle things when it comes to games, because games are traditionally made... linear story kind of games, which horror games, I would argue, are pretty mostly linear, I would say. Would you say?
I think, with the exception of probably Amnesia, I think almost every horror game I've played has been heavily linear on rails.
So all linear games, like even stuff like sound in linear games, is geared towards just one player. And, the way that the sound builds tension as you move through the level. Like, if one player is moving through the level and can hear the sound getting ever more tense, and the other player is moving through the level in a slightly different way and isn't hearing that sound get more tense, they can kind of communicate that to each other, and it's not going to be as immersive. And the way that monsters attack you, and the ability for two people to work together and take down things quicker, like, it all contributes to the threat and the tension that comes from horror games just not quite being there.
Yeah.
So, what do you think can fix that? Like, how do co-op games actually make it so that... How would you... What would be your first step in fixing a co-op horror game?
So, I unfortunately didn't get to play it, because I lost faith in the franchise halfway through the first minute of Dead Space 2. But Dead Space I thought Dead Space 1 was an amazing horror game. It was kind of really tapping into the original sort of, Ripley... Aliens. Ridley. Not Ripley.
Ripley.
Ripley?
No, it's Ripley.
Ridley.
It's Ripley.
Ridley
Scott is the person who made it.
Yeah, that's what I was... That's what I was trying to reference. Ridley Scott's
right.
Aliens.
Which has Ripley.
Which has Ripley in it, yeah. That's...
Believe it or not, it has Ripley.
Wow, there's a
terrible
joke for the older listeners in there.
I'm not a dad yet, I swear.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for breaking my train of thought there.
Okay.
Dead Space 1 did a really good job with the isolation side of things. Dead Space 2 was just a jump scare piece of crap that it was hot. I really loathed it.
Well, it was more action oriented, wasn't it?
It was totally more action oriented. It was kind of like I think it was trying to do the whole. It was trying to have its cake and eat it, and also not be a cake. Like it was just trying to have literally everything all at once.
Right.
The third Dead Space, I'm pretty sure it was the third one anyway, did something that was interesting. And again, like I said, I haven't played it, but I was following the game series at least out of misanthropy.
Curiosity.
Yeah. And that was that it incorporated a co-op mode, but the two players in co-op mode, they very rarely interacted with each other. They saw each other, but they were often on separate areas of the map. And like you could see the other guy battling aliens in a separate tunnel that was nearby, or like a space tube, or like a piece of, there might be a piece of glass separating you, sort of thing. So you're sure. Isolated separately, but together in a bizarre way. It was actually a cool concept, and I think that could have been done really well. Again, not having played the game, I don't know how well it was actually implemented, but that concept really stuck with me. I thought, wow, that could be a really interesting game where you've got two people who are, isolated, have limited resources, which again is another big part of horror games, is the limited resources and the limited ability to actually tackle the problems in the game.
I think also with regards to that, without regards to the limited resources and kind of the difficulty of horror games and that feeling of kind of desperation as you run down to your last bullet, I feel that sometimes co-op versions of games that are primarily single player, like you'll have a single player game but then there's the co-op kind of add-on, they're not very well tweaked in that way.
No.
And so you go either side of the spectrum. You either have the monsters are way too hard, and even with two people you're just not finding enough ammunition and you don't have enough power to take them out, or you can run around with your trigger held down and you'll be fine. It seems like there's almost it's not that it's an afterthought, but they obviously didn't have enough time to completely tweak the game to make it
so
as
this is
nice.
one of the things that Left 4 Dead 1 did. And Left 4 Dead 1 was a really good game, but I think the reason why it was a really good game, you're about to disagree with me?
It's a horror game. I would argue if it's a horror game, but go on.
We'll
get to that.
I think it would technically still be a horror game, or at least in its early iterations, because in the early days, before you knew the meta of the game, you didn't know what was coming around the next corner. And this is what I was saying, is that one of the biggest revelations in the Left 4 Dead games wasn't the fact that you had co-op zombie shooting and whatever. It was the director aspect.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And that really wasn't played up as much as I think it could have been. Or at least, certainly people who play Left 4 Dead probably have no idea what the director even is. But what it was a pseudo-intelligent AI system. It's not actually an AI.
No.
But it is some code, some learning algorithm code, that can take your experience as you're playing it and modify it to keep it tense. So it would, for example, rather than having the monsters appear at the same point each time and knowing when they because some part of horror games, a big part of them is that when something bad's about to happen, because maybe the room's opened up, or you found a health kit in the previous room, or it's the boss battle thing, right?
Yeah.
Left 4 Dead threw that instead and said, well, maybe you don't know when the boss battle is coming.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know what's going to be around the corner because it's going to change each time, because we know that you just dispatched with this group of zombies really quickly. So maybe we'll give you nothing for a big gap and then swamp you with zombies.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Yeah,
you
exactly.
dispatch with a group of zombies really quickly, so we'll just throw another one directly on you when you're least prepared to sort of tackle it because you're still recovering from the previous one. It actually had a really interesting director system that allowed you to keep the tension high. And that's what really makes a horror game, is the tension. Not so much
but
the...
it's still... going back to Stanyo's original question, I still don't think that... when I was playing Left 4 Dead, I never felt scared. I never felt... I really didn't.
Certainly not after playing it for, hundreds of hours. But in the early days, coming across a witch, you were like, oh god, no!
Well,
Don't go near it!
It felt tense, but I wasn't scared. I guess there's the difference. I was like, oh shit, this thing's about to tear us apart, and we'll lose. But I didn't feel scared
I suppose. And so I guess a
environment.
part of that is that... So you always have 4 people on the team. You've always got the 2 AI that'll follow you around if you're playing it with one other
two-player
person.
or whatever. Yeah.
So that mitigates it in some way. You never get split up, I guess, is the problem with Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was kind of thinking might be really interesting to do in those kinds of games, like Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2, is to actually split the party. That would be really, really cool. If you split the party, disable voice chat in-game, because, a lot of people used in-game voice chat. You can't stop people using Mumble or Skype or something like that. But if you split the party and made it so that, you went off into these separate parts and you just had to survive by yourself, that might reintroduce some of that sense of isolation. So essentially turning it into a single-player experience, let's face it.
Yeah.
It would actually take away the co-op option and just put it into single-player just for a little bit, raise the tension, see who comes out at the end of it, and, you get out of the... Maybe you get out of the tunnels at the end of it and, there's only 3 of you. And the 4th person is gone, and then they've turned into a zombie, or something like that. That would be interesting to kind of see that happen.
Yeah.
But that's still not solving the problem of co-op, because that's not co-op, that's single player. That's co-op, then single player, then co-op kind of thing. So, so we've thought about this, and we have talked about this before this episode, and it seems like you kind of can't really have a horror game with co-op, or at least to our minds, you can't have a horror game with co-op where both players are experiencing the same thing.
Right.
For two reasons. One of which is the mini, it's like a miniature version of the one hero problem, which Tim, you're probably better at explaining because you've played more MMOs than me. But
oh, by a short hair. I mean, the one savior problem is the fact that in so many games you're playing the one. You're playing, Neo.
Yeah.
You're playing the one true ring holder. You're playing the one true savior to the realm. The one person who can defeat the dragon. The one person who can solve the mystery. And when you've got more than one person who is the one and treated as the one, it becomes immediately stupid and silly and trivial and incredibly frustrating.
It definitely breaks the wall down, yeah.
Absolutely. And so the problem with the co-op game is a lot of co-op games, unless they were specifically made to be co-op games in the first place, a la things like Borderlands, you're just playing duplicates of the main character. I mean, even Halo, which was the first game to do, especially on consoles, co-op storytelling in a cinematic way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people will prove me wrong in the comment section. Well, you think you forgot the actual original on the Amiga 64? I think that was a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would just play two Master Chiefs, and when the cutscenes happened,
one was pink, and
you just have two Master Chiefs hanging around, or one of them would disappear. Like it was very bizarre. And so while the gameplay was a lot of fun, it didn't make any sense in
thematically. Yeah.
The theme of it, and horror theme is why you're there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's obviously one of the problems.
What I was going to say is, what about Contagion? Because we did play Contagion together earlier on in the year. Not extensively, because it was in heavy alpha when it came out. It has matured since then, and I would certainly love to go back to it. But that was a Left 4 Dead style game, which I certainly felt was scarier than Left 4 Dead.
I thought it was scarier than Left 4 Dead because the focus of the game was different. So Left 4 Dead is very much you can and probably will shoot a lot of zombies, like a lot of zombies. Whereas Contagion, I think they've tried to go more on the spectrum of Resident Evil than Left 4 Dead. Like, you do have access to higher powered rifles and all that stuff. You're not just stuck with a pistol for the whole thing and maybe a baseball bat or whatever. But for the most part, you're going to be trying to avoid zombies rather than take them on. At least that was kind of my feeling anyway. Like I found a couple of times that we did try and engage a whole bunch of zombies. We lost. We got our ass kicked. Yeah, exactly.
And quickly and swiftly.
Very quickly, very swiftly. But I don't know. It still didn't really scare me. There wasn't any building of tension. The tension was the same the whole way through, and the tension was mainly connected to my health bar.
Yeah,
like,
and so that's because
atmosphere.
They didn't have something like the director AI that can change the experience on the fly, even though each level was procedurally sort of created. Not generated, but created in the sense that the objectives changed each time you played it. So one thing I would have thought that Contagion could really have done with, and games like, for example, Left 4 Dead, in terms of horror co-op, split the party, but give them communication tools that are intrinsic and limited to the game.
Sure.
So there was a really cool demo, a tech demo, that I, in hindsight, really wish I'd linked you to before recording the episode.
It's okay.
But
I trust you. You can explain it to me, and that'll explain it to the listeners.
Yeah, and we'll add it to the show notes and the rest of it. But it's a fantastic game that is based around the concept of sound and voice over IP in the game. What it does is that your microphone is active throughout the entire game. Mm-hmm. It's not push to talk. And if you make noises or talk, it's projected in the game around you from your character.
Right.
So if people are nearby, they can hear you. They can hear you making whatever noise is coming through your microphone.
Right.
So that is an important tool in terms of like the stealth mechanic. But you also have a walkie-talkie that you can use to talk to the other players on your team. So voice over IP, the communication, the legitimate side of it, where you're using the walkie-talkie and you're saying, hey, I think there's a sniper in the flower bed over there, sort of thing. while your team can hear that, so can everyone who's literally around you, and also
Right.
who is around your team. So if someone's sneaking up on you, that's a good way to sort of get around that.
Right.
It was a really, really interesting concept, and the gameplay looked terrible. But again, this is a tech demo. Like, it was really low poly, very
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
Quake-esque.
Sure.
It was like Quake meets Armor. Like,
Wow.
it was a really bizarre blend.
You can count the polygons kind of thing.
Yeah, you can count the vertices. It was mental.
Wow.
But the game
Well, that-
mechanic idea could be transferred to a horror scene very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we've said so. One of the problems with the game, the horror game as a co-op genre, is the fact that you are usually experiencing some kind of variation of the one savior problem. But the other thing is that you're usually both experiencing exactly the same experience. Like, you are both walking through the same environment with the same amount of skills, with the same amount of abilities. When is that ever going to happen in real life? Like, if you are in a survival situation, when are you going to get two people that can wield all types of guns equally and be real, like, the same athletic skill, etc., etc.?
And who can carry 12 of them.
Yeah, and you can carry everything that you pick up, etc. Like, when is that going to happen? It's not, obviously.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the next point, which is that horror games have a really, really a good opportunity now, I think, to try and make asymmetric gameplay experiences. Now, asymmetry is something that we may have talked about before. I'm not entirely
I'd be
sure.
surprised if we haven't, since I have such a raging
Something
for
Raging intellectual curiosity.
a giant throbbing intellectual curiosity.
Exactly. So asymmetric gameplay experiences are exactly what they say. So one person's gameplay experience is not the same as another person's gameplay experience. And you can do that a number of ways. You can make it so that you choose characters, a la every game that has characters in it. Like, in fantasy games, you can choose a mage or a rogue or a warrior, and these things change the way that you experience the game. You're either going to be a melee up close and personal and seeing the whites of the enemy's eyes as a melee character, or you're going to be kind of strafing around at the back of the party as a wizard kind of thing. Whatever. But horror games, I mean, I can't really think of too many where different players in a co-op game...
No.
I mean, I can't think of any. I literally cannot think of any.
No. I
haven't
mean, Left 4
played
Dead
widely.
did the thing where you could only really choose one weapon other than your sidearm. And so,
Yeah.
and in most Left 4 Dead matches, certainly before the patch sort of thing came through where they started changing all the core gameplay, you could only, like, one person could have the rifle and one person could have the shotgun. So that introduced a sort of artificial asymmetry to it, but it was not true asymmetry by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, the gameplay was exactly the same. To be fair to Left 4 Dead and Left 4Dead 2, they did have a little bit of asymmetry in the zombie side. So if you chose to be the zombies attacking the players, you could choose kind of different classes of zombies. But really, it wasn't that much different because
well,
you were
you
still
could kind
just
of
trying
even
to
say
attack.
that the ability to play the zombie is a form of asymmetry. I mean, certainly more so
absolutely.
than terrorist versus counter-terrorist in Counter-Strike.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's still not far enough, I don't think. I mean, you still are shooting zombies if you're a human, or killing humans if you're a zombie. Like, there's not that much different there. And I think that you have to go way out in order to be able to kind of explore this idea of making co-op horror viable. I feel like you need to go into the realm of actually, like, completely changing so that the what is on the screen for one player is completely different to what is on the screen for another player. By introducing gameplay mechanics such as, and this is something that Stanyo, I believe, also mentioned on his blog, and which is something that Tim and myself kind of also came up with very, very quickly, is the fact that why not deprive a player of one sense and give another player that sense, and they have to work together in order to progress through the game and build tension that way.
Although in a computer game, when we're talking about restricting senses, there aren't that many you can restrict. Really, just two.
Well, there's two, yeah.
There's sound and sight.
I
Your
would
character
say-
can no longer smell. He suffers an eternal ennui as he laments his loss of the ability to appreciate roses and perfume and the smell of his firstborn child.
Yeah, okay. So we don't have smell-o-vision, so we can't actually do that.
That would be horror.
That would be fantastic. Not only
That's
senses,
more
I
Stephen
should say.
King horror, though.
Not only senses though, you can restrict abilities, obviously, like basic gameplay
Yeah.
abilities. So, say walking, you can get rid of walking or aiming or any of those things. Like
You know what would be really interesting? If one of the characters was in a wheelchair.
Oh, that would be cool. Maybe they were in a wheelchair. Okay, we're just going into game ideas. But maybe if they were in a wheelchair and they could shoot, and the other player had to, use both hands to wheel them around, and had to stop in order to, I don't know, shoot
Well,
or
I
do
like to
karate
think
or
that,
something.
that they could wheel themselves. That wouldn't be a problem, but stairs would be a problem.
Oh, you'd have to pick them up and move them along.
Or maybe, one person would have to stay with them and hold off the location while the other person
that
sent
door.
down the elevator or lowered a ramp or found something to put a ramp on the stairs, like a board or something. I think you'd probably be, you'd have to be very careful to do it in a politically correct manner because
I think
of
that would
political
be-
correctness.
I think it would be a minefield, in fact.
But I think that would be a genuinely interesting game, and certainly would be interesting in terms of making a conversation about various forms of restricted ability.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. If the buildings that we're trying to get through weren't wheelchair accessible, then you'd be kind of stuffed, and you'd probably notice it in the real world.
Yeah.
But yeah, stuff like that, where, the one that sort of most easily springs to mind, at least for us, we found, was the idea of one player doing only movement and only having sound. So they're in complete darkness, they can't see, and the other person being someone who can see in the darkness somehow. There's some, I don't know, pick some kind of narrative. They're an ethereal ghost that can see in the dark. They're a person that is looking through security cameras. Who knows? Like, that can
There's a person
see
who
where the
is
player
a security camera.
Yeah, maybe.
A person who is a ghost who can haunt security cameras.
It writes itself. I think actually
Why has no one hired me?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's a mystery to me. But yeah, look, this is a relatively easy to think of, kind of thing, that where if you had that, you would just need that, rather than the ability to speak to other players and interact with other players being something that takes away from the horror and takes away from the atmosphere. That is literally using it to create the atmosphere. Because if you are playing with someone that they could ruin it by trolling you, but that's the same in any game. Like, if you were walking along and there's a zombie right in front of you, they could just say, "Oh yeah, no, you're fine, keep going," and troll you that way. But if you did both dedicate yourself to actually playing the game properly, it could be really tense, and it completely eliminates that idea of not being able to communicate properly.
Absolutely. I think being able to communicate isn't the issue, though. I think that having the communication actually be meaningful is the issue. So, for example, if it does go away for whatever reason, you appreciate that it's gone. And when you do have it, it's something that you legitimately need to use to complete the game, sort of thing. See, they tried to do that in Contagion in one manner, because there are parts of it where, my favorite mode of Contagion, which I know is not your favorite mode of Contagion, was the escape mode, where you had to go around and collect the various things that unlocked the doors and find out where you're meant to be going next. And that also had the nifty thing with a cell phone, or mobile phone, if you're in Australia, where you had to find the map on your phone and then get clues and things.
Yeah, for sure.
But the problem with that was that when we were playing it, all four of us sort of just trotted around in a little, group of close-knit ducklings, going from room to room together, collecting things. Whereas I think if the game forced you, if someone had to be there to press the button while someone moved to another room to get the keys for this other room that opened the other thing, or, whatever it was, that forced you to split up and to do something that was asymmetric in goal design rather than asymmetric in ability.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And and again, that could actually work with regards to just restricting abilities for people. So maybe, maybe not everyone in the party has the ability to use a security panel or something like that. Like, you need to have one player that stays there the whole time to mess with the security. Like, he's a hacker or something like that, who knows. And the other players are, just unable to do that and have to go and, be the person that goes and presses the button. So, like, making it so that you have to... Restricting abilities, I think, is really interesting. I think would be a really interesting way of making co-op horror. It's still not quite... I still don't feel like we've quite nailed it. I don't think that we are going to in an hour-long section on a podcast, but
no,
that's quite a lofty goal. But, there is an essence of... Horror is an atmosphere, and horror is a good horror movie, a good horror book builds tension. And in a lot of these games that we're talking about, the action comes thick and fast. Like, these are not games that are meant to be played for the 2 hours of a horror movie, or the hour and a half of a horror movie even, or the long read of a horror book. Like, how would they be able to cram that tension, that building of tension into, what's an average game length? Like, for a multiplayer game, it's probably about half an hour to an hour.
No, I think we might have even hit the nail on the head without realizing it. Because I think that... I was just thinking back.
I love being told that I'm amazing.
You are Phill. You are just so amazing.
Oh, thanks.
The love of my life. If you think about, like, the really good horror books, I was just going through my head, I was thinking of the best horror stories in my mind.
Edgar Allan Poe, obviously.
Poe, yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes without saying.
Yeah.
But even, like, so The Langoliers by Stephen King was one that came to mind. And also The Mist by Stephen King. Not the movie, because we don't talk about that, alright?
That's a horrible movie.
But a really amazing short story.
Yeah.
So the Langoliers is a story about a group of people who are on an aeroplane, and they wake up, and the plane is empty. They land the plane, and it turns out that somehow it's really kind of hard to explain, and this is part of the thing that I'm sort of working towards. They've somehow gone out of sync with time. They've found a portal to the place in between time.
Right. And
they're in this in-between place. The world that exists is slowly being eaten away by this inexplicable, force that I guess... It's almost like frames in a movie, the frame rate. It's like each frame gets eaten away by these things when a new frame comes in as time moves forward, but they've somehow ended up in an old frame, sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
It's a really good short story, and it's very, very well written, as you expect from someone like Stephen King. But the horror comes from the other senses, the ones that you don't have in a video game.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the ability to hear, you have the ability to see, you have a pseudo-tactile sense in a video game, in that you can interact with the world, but you can't feel it interacting with you very much, and there's a very limited aspect for that. But you don't have the sense of smell, you don't have the sense of inner thought and monologue that you can get in a novel, for example.
Yeah, but I think that that's not necessarily the whole issue, right? Because there are other games, such as, fantasy games or sci-fi games, that do pull you in. I mean, you'll talk literally endlessly about Mass Effect, because that game pulled you so completely into its world.
I will.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that horror games have had a problem in that they don't dedicate the time.
Right, okay, maybe that's it then. It's just the time spent on it.
Well, I mean, have you played a horror game that goes for 20 hours?
No. Well, 20 hours, yes, but it's mostly been shooty, bang, bang time for that 20 hours. 20 hours. I certainly haven't played a horror game that's 80 hours.
I mean,
or more.
The Walking Dead?
Nah, see, I finished that in 6.
Well, and also that's I suppose more of a human drama. I wouldn't call that horror.
No, the horror is man.
Well, yeah.
In that one.
Yeah.
The things
And I mean,
that we do to each other.
Yeah, we're kind of getting away from the point of like the focus of the podcast, which is co-op games. But maybe it's just not possible. I mean, beyond what we've said with regards to asymmetric gaming and trying to make it so that players do have to essentially build that tension themselves. You are probably going to be relying on players to take it seriously enough that they will actually create the tension for themselves, because I mean, to give developers their due and to give game makers their due, like, they can only do so much, as we've said. Like, they don't have all the senses to use. They don't have all the senses at their disposal. So, and they don't have the time in which to let the story build and, you know, grow and become more and more tense and more, you know, fearful, I guess. So, I mean, they can't do very much more than giving it to you and say, hey, if you want to get the best out of this, take it seriously. If you're not going to take it seriously and you're going to be just joking with your friends over Mumble or whatever, you know, that's kind of your lookout. And if it turns into basically just another action game by you doing that, then it's kind of your fault.
Yeah, you ruined it. Can't blame us. We tried our best. You were a dick.
Yeah, I mean, and you can kind of...
So,
sorry,
I know what mine is, but what is the scariest part of a game that you've played?
I think it was actually probably Gone Home. Because I read absolutely nothing about that game before I started playing it, right? And all the game is you walking around a house at night, reading things in the house. And there's a point in the house where you go into a room and things are definitely not what they seem, but they seem horrible. And there was a point before I got into that room where I kind of just had a premonition of this is where the story beat would be if something horrible was going to go wrong.
Yes,
right?
Your writer sense tingled.
Well, kind of just the lead up to it and the information that they had given to you. Literally all the game is just you know, picking up pieces of paper and stuff like that and reading it. And there just was this sense of dread. Like, I really did not want this to happen. Like, the thing that didn't happen, which was fine. But I did not want it to happen. And that was a single player game. So, you know, that's probably the most dread I've ever felt in a game.
Yeah.
What about yours? I imagine Amnesia, no?
No.
No?
No, and this is interesting because you've picked a game that's not technically a horror game. And I've picked a game that's not technically a horror game either.
What was yours then?
Mine is one of the scenes from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how far through that you ever got.
I got up right to the end, yeah.
You did? Oh, excellent.
I didn't finish the game.
Oh, that's right, yeah, because you've had this...
I got right up to the end where you're... Spoiler alert, it's a 20-year-old game or whatever the hell. You're fighting the big werewolf.
That's not the
massive one. Well, the massive lichens, and then you're out in the forest, and etc. etc. Anyway, continue.
No,
Sorry.
there's more to that.
I know. I looked up the endings. It's okay.
I took the Smiling Jack ending just for reference.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
No, it was the scene in the haunted house. There's an abandoned hotel, on a cliffside, very Stephen King, very cliched, and it's haunted by this ghost that of a person that died in a horrible fire that was there. And as you're going around, like this game is not a horror game; it's a power fantasy. Throughout the entire game, you're constantly better than everyone around you because you are a powerful vampire. And
it's so awesome.
You're constantly, you're feeding off people and you're manipulating people and you're being this total badass. And then you get into this haunted house and all of a sudden, none of your abilities are useful here.
That's right.
Because you can't fight anything. There's nothing to fight. It's just a case of trying to find the next clue and trying to figure out the puzzle of what happened here. But every now and then, things will be thrown at you and do damage that you can't block. And it's
the contrast.
It's the contrast between going from this super powerful, power fantasy to being weak, helpless, and almost reliving, in a way, the feelings of the people that died in the reason why it's haunted. And I thought that was really, really well done. Another example of why that game is so heavily underrated.
Oh, so good. But again, that's a single-player experience, and could you get that in a co-op experience?
Well, I don't understand why you couldn't have two people there who can't do anything.
Yeah, but so what you're saying is that a very sudden change in ability might also give some way of making people feel more tense and kind of change it up.
And so part of it was the altered reality of it as well. The rooms would switch between their old state and then their current real state. So you would constantly be sort of thinking which one of these is real, what's going on, where am I, sort of thing. Actually,
so I guess
really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, in a horror game, a co-op horror game, if every now and then on your screen, your co-op allies model changed to that of an enemy.
Oh, yeah.
And you could no longer tell who was who.
That would be cool.
That would.
I guess it's you would have to. So again, it would be an asymmetric gameplay experience, but you would be undermining the rules which you have set up as a game designer.
Need a weapon?
So you would be saying, as they're moving through the game, physics starts to change, or the rooms don't work the way they used to, or your abilities might change, or your models change, or the enemies change, or that's kind of more of a psychological, I guess, horror.
Yeah.
In that the player never really knows what to expect and doesn't really know what to do when it does happen. Yeah, I mean that could work, I guess.
Yeah.
As long as
I think just don't give him a gun.
Yeah. God, that worked wonders in Amnesia.
Just don't give people guns.
10 minutes. That's how long I lasted.
Do you know how Left 4 Dead would look in Australia?
And burned the hard drive.
Like, Left 4 Dead, if it was set in Australia, would be 4 people who got killed because they didn't have a gun.
That's true, we don't have guns. Or it's really hard to get a gun. It's really hard to license a gun. Well, I mean, I kind of feel like we've probably hit all the notes that we're going to hit. So, in terms of... So, dot points at the end. So, things that might work for co-op horror. Asymmetric gameplay. Mm-hmm. Whether it is, one person is actually completely asymmetric gameplay where one person can't see and one person can't hear or something like that.
The more asymmetric, the better. But just any amount of asymmetry. You need to switch it up so that the two people's experiences are genuinely different.
Yeah. Less action. Essentially, I guess we can wrap that up in less action, less guns, less ability.
Or no guns.
More helplessness, I suppose, is the thing. Unreliable gameplay worlds, if you're going for the psychological thing. I think the original Fear did okay with that. Like, there were really weird parts in that game.
Yeah.
I remember.
The first one, again, it got really
the very first one, yeah.
bad in the sequels.
Yeah, they tried to go a little bit too hard on those. I think that's about it, really. It's really the asymmetry thing, dedicating yourself to a storyline, which may be difficult in co-op. We've said in single player, obviously, it works really well because you have time and space to build that story and build that tension to a point where the player is just continually on edge and doesn't know what to expect. But in a co-op game, obviously, you're not going to sit there for 20 hours with your friend, getting into the same headspace. Players treating the game as a horror game and not treating it as an action game for shitty bang bang fun.
And proper utilization of communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually treating communication as a tool and an asset rather than as something that's just to be tacked on.
Yeah, for sure.
Or a
cool,
given.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, given it all.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, hopefully that kind of got to a little bit of a resolution. Hope we tackled that okay for you, Stanyo. Feel free to send us our next topic. We do very much appreciate your emails. We don't want to steal all your content though, so maybe next topic we'll actually do one that we come up with ourselves. That would be nice. But yeah, I guess we should mention the fact that if anyone has gotten through this whole thing
alive,
yeah, exactly. Maybe something's taking you while you're listening. I really hope not. That'd be horrible. Imagine if someone died, then the last thing that they heard was us rabbiting on about games.
Now I feel terrible.
Yeah. We're sorry if you're dead.
I should have been there.
We will be doing a giveaway. We've got a few games to give away that have been sitting in our Steam accounts for a little while, and we want to, share the love, essentially. One of them will be a horror-themed game, Contagion, which we've actually talked about. It's a co-op horror game, and it does pretty well at it. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. We will be posting something on our Facebook, something on our Twitter, something on our website to say how you should enter to do that. So we'll have Contagion, a couple other games that we've got that might be interesting to you. But other than that, I guess we should do the outro. So thanks for listening. You can find us on the web at timandphill.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/timandphill. If you want to contact us directly, however, you can find Tim on Twitter at DungeonMaster. Add him. Hey, some people don't know how to spell dungeon. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Add him as a friend on Steam as a Ageotas. That's AGEOTAS, and it's the steamcommunity.com/ID/that. Or at his website, which is CorsairsAnchorage.com.
And as always, you can find Phill on Twitter at ToothSoup, which is the words tooth and soup put together. Hopefully everyone can spell those. Add him as a friend on Steam as a pocket. No, it's a Flaxy now, isn't it?
It is Flaxy.
Has been for a while.
Yeah, we should change that.
Which is FLAXEH, which is again steamcommunities.com/ID/Flaxy, or at his personal website, which is toothsoup.com. Thanks for listening.
And happy gaming.